Hello, Haunted Family. Welcome back. Story 1. Helen's in the shower. I was 12 years old. I was in my room listening to my parents arguing upstairs. I was so mad because they were always fighting, and at the time, I just wished they'd go ahead and get divorced. So I was standing with my back to the wall, facing my bed. Suddenly, my anger turned into primal fear. Fight or flight kicked in. I had no idea what I was running from, but I ran for my bed. Or at least I tried to. I only made it a couple steps before I saw a wisp of a black shadow out of the corner of my eye, and I felt something grab a fistful of my hair. Since I was running, it caused my head to be yanked backwards, so I was looking at the ceiling. I recovered pretty quickly, though. It made another dash for my bed, where I stayed until I built up the courage to leave my room. A lot of strange paranormal things happened in that house, but that was the scariest for me. I also worked at a chemical plant for a couple years. I was a cleaner. People died there sometimes. One guy actually within a month of me starting there. There were rumors of certain buildings being haunted. On my third day, my first day working alone, I was cleaning the basement of my assigned building. It was very quiet down there. People rarely came down there, but you'd always hear if someone was there, because everything echoed very loudly. On this day, I was down there alone, dragging some of my supplies from the janitor's closet over to the women's washroom. I turned on the bathroom light, I put up my sign, and went for more supplies. When I got back to the washroom, the light had been switched off. I thought I must have bumped it on my way out, so I switched it back on and made sure to keep my distance the next time. I came back in to find the light had been switched off again. Now the basement already had this creepy feeling, so I was a little spooked. I thought that someone must have been trying to play a prank on me. You know, prank the new girl. But it was weird that I didn't hear anyone walking around. I mentioned it to a couple of coworkers later, and they immediately told me that my building must be one of the haunted ones. Now, I'm a pretty big believer in the paranormal, but I always try to find a logical explanation before I jump to the ghosts. But since I had so many things I can't explain, I decided I was going to download one of those ghost box apps on my phone. I decided to try it out a few weeks later when I was working. I waited until I was cleaning that women's washroom again. To open the app, I put on my headphones and just started to ask some generic questions. Is anyone here? And I kept hearing something coming over and over. It sounded like Ellen or Helen. I kept cleaning, listening to the ghost box, not talking. I moved on to the shower. As I was standing in front of the shower, about to step in and clean it, I hear clearly, "Helen is in the shower." It came through loud and clear over the ghost box. I noped out of there so fast. It was almost a month before I could bring myself up to clean that women's washroom again. Story 2. The Victorian. The instances began to occur soon after my parents, myself, and 4 brothers moved into an old Victorian house in a small town in Iowa. The house was rather dilapidated, long since shed its former glory with its peeling paint, but it suited my parents' pockets with such a large family. The 4 bedrooms had a great appeal to it. All too soon we learned that if we wanted to live in the house with some semblance of peace, we had best delegate what we called the back bedroom to our unseen inhabitant that stalked the night in agitated frustration. If you dared venture into her room. When we first moved in, the back bedroom, unlike the rest of the house, retained much of its vintage appeal from the past, filled with treasures that would fancy any child's delight. A beautiful bedroom set, complete with vanity, an ornate wardrobe, filled with old clothes and finery, that suggested a lady had once occupied the room. We kids loved to play in the room. As our parents undertook the job of renovating the old house, the first instances that denoted an unseen presence in the house was an odd pattern sound heard late at night, a sort of shuffle knock across the creaking wood floors upstairs. This was always followed by our dog's sudden agitation. Laying at the foot of the stairs, he would twitch his ears, then bare his teeth and begin to growl, as if someone was standing at the top of the stairs. An investigation would reveal no one was there. As weeks progressed, other things began to occur. Little nuances that, more often than not, pointed the finger at one of the 5 children occupying the house. The lights being left on. The water in the kitchen sink would be found running at full blast. In the morning, on occasion the front door would be found standing wide open, when my father had distinctly recalled locking the door before he retired for the night. The shuffling sound became more pronounced. It occurred nightly. My parents' bedroom, located on the first floor, would often awaken to the noise, thinking that a child had been up and about. My father would stomp upstairs, prepared to seek justice, and put that child firmly back to bed, only to find all 5 of the children tucked away, fast asleep. My father was at first convinced that a child was playing a prank, decided to stay up late one night in hopes of surprising the culprit, or culprits. My father was a very serious person, from the old school, spare the rod, spoil a child type. At the first sound of the shuffle, my father moved quietly up the stairs, in hopes of catching the culprit by surprise. As it turned out, he was the one surprised. All of his children were still fast asleep, but something was awake. In details he described later, denoting that they had set his hair standing on end. Standing at the top of the stairs, my father peered into the front room, where 3 of his children lay fast asleep. Transfixed, he watched the dresser drawers slide open, only to be shoved shut again. The mattress springs on the old bed shook, as if some unseen fingers thought to wake the children. My parents, seeking out the why or what of this, began to dig into the history of the house. They knew that there had only been one owner previously, a woman who had lived well into her 80s. What they didn't know was that she had died in the house. She had fell down those stairs and broke her neck. That back bedroom had been her bedroom. The furnishings and personal effects were hers as well. And even more disturbing was the fact that she had, in her last few years, become something of a recluse, a shut-in. And as such, she always wore slippers on her feet and walked with the assistance of a cane, thus explaining the mystery of the odd pattern of shuffle knock across the creaking wood floor. The first thing my father did was lock that back bedroom, in essence sealing it off, an unavowed promise to leave her stuff in domain alone, in hopes that she would offer us the same courtesy. In the following 6 years that we lived in the house, she was rarely meddlesome or agitated. though her presence was still noted on occasion. The shuffle, shuffle knock across the creaking floor. She did have her days, though. A few instances I clearly recall an occasion in the dead of winter that my parents awoke in the cold in the middle of the night, only to find that once again the front door had been left ajar, and in the wake of a snowstorm, 3 inches of snow had covered the entire dining room. We would awaken to find the Christmas tree light blaring into an otherwise blackness of the living room, where my parents clearly recall unplugging them. Then on occasion, we'd still find the water faucet in the kitchen running full blast. And on these rare occasions, it is interesting to note that the back bedroom door, her bedroom door, would always be found unlocked and ajar. Story 3. My Haunted Places. I've got a couple stories for you. When I lived in Chicago, my school was haunted. Many years ago, it went by a different name, and one day the south wing of the school caught on fire. It said that a couple, janitors, never made it out of the building. The ghosts supposedly haunt the basement, where the footsteps and sometimes moans can be heard, especially when hardly anyone is around, like in the early morning hours or after school, a time when almost everyone else is home and the janitors are cleaning up. My brother had once told us that he and his friends would play basketball in the gym after hours because the living janitors would let them in. One particular day, the janitor had told them about the ghost and that they could talk to him. He told the ghost to switch the lights on and off twice for yes and once for no, so they could ask questions, and the ghost would answer at least until they asked one particular question. Are you a good ghost or are you bad? It never answered that one. Freaked out, my brother and his friends left in a hurry. Who knows if the janitor was telling the truth? Maybe he had a friend somewhere flicking the lights on and off. But my brother was sure no one else was around the light switches. One thing is for sure, people believe that school is haunted. My second story happened in my aunt's house in Texas. I've been told that her house was built on an old family cemetery, which lies under her bedroom. At first, they were just classically haunted. But after a while, the ghosts left the family alone. Now, the only ones that are haunted by the spirits are those that don't live there and only come to visit from time to time. My brother went to visit for the summer. One morning, he was alone. Everyone else was at work. He could hear a chopping noise coming from the kitchen, like someone was cutting up vegetables. So he went to see who was home and what they were cooking. When he went into the kitchen, he found that the noise had stopped, and that the many birds that my aunt had in the house were deathly quiet. They seemed too scared to sing their favorite songs. Eventually he heard moaning sounds. He ran out of the house and sat on the porch. It seemed as if the ghost had followed him, because he could now hear with a pencil rolling and dropping, coming from near their van. I remember this well because he called home and told us all about it. That's how frightened he was. I have been there and heard the shower running, and then turn off and on for hours when no one was there. My cousin Maria has heard the sound of nails tapping on the bathroom mirror, when the only person near the mirror was her. It's so spooky that we take turns sitting in the bathroom while somebody else takes a bath. We don't want to be in there alone. One of my other aunts could have sworn that they saw someone other than a family member, sitting in the living room at 2 o'clock in the morning. One of my cousins has had the same experience as my brother, hearing the chopping and washing sounds coming from the kitchen, and observing that the birds were deathly quiet, only to go into the kitchen and find nothing going on. I really like visiting my family, but I'm wary of their house. The weirdest part of all is that the only part of the house that's not haunted is my aunt and uncle's bedroom, where the cemetery is supposed to be. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, leave me a comment down below, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to. Thanks for listening. Bye. Music by Carl Casey at Wildbat Audio.